Вітаю всіх глядачів.
Welcome to all male and female audience members.
Конкурсу Docudays UA. Сьогодні ми
Today we are going to discuss this film, and today we are going to talk to Ulyana Osovska and Strashny. Am I right in stressing this correctly? Okay, good evening, and a couple of things I'd like to talk about, and a couple of things I'd like to remind to the film is going to be available in DocuSpace starting from 8 p.m. Kyiv time, and it will be accessible throughout the entire festival. For 600 views, you can also ask your questions to Ulyana and Denis through this video form, which is also available on DocuSpace, just like now. And if you are able to do it for this event, we'll be also very grateful. If you have any comments, questions, opens, retorts, objections, any kind of feedback is always welcome. So, first of all, I would like to congratulate you on the Ukrainian premiere of the film, as I know that the Estonian premiere has happened, and the film is in Estonian distribution, and we're going to talk about this. And the first question is as follows. So we understand why you're not with us because of the lockdown. Zoom has become today's reality. But are you in Ukraine or are you stuck in some festival? What do you see around yourselves? Hi, everyone. Well, near me there's Ulyana Osovska, my beautiful wife, and regardless of us planning to be in Kyiv, we always mark Docudays on our calendar to make sure we marathon and binge on films in theaters and network with colleagues. But the lockdown caught us in the nature a little bit, but let's just say we are in the nature. Let's say we are outdoors, where it's a little bit warmer than in Ukraine, but, well, we're also getting this weather, which is a little bit warmer than usual. So finally, I think we can argue that spring is starting in Ukraine. I'd like to start with this dimension that is it true that what I've been told, that this film, this Tales of a Toy House, actually came from your experience of meeting each other. So this is, even though this is not your first film that you're making together, how did you start working together? And is this a part of your personal history of sorts? Well, we usually take roles when we tell the story, because this is a story not only of the film, but this is a story of our family. So, well, let me start. This is a very long story with a lot of plot twists and turns, but we met Denis. Denis and I met right after the Maidan when he was wounded in a hospital, and I was volunteering, and I was volunteering to help send the wounded participants of Maidan for treatment on behalf of an NGO. So we met at a hospital, and there I was supervising a humanitarian mission provided by Estonia. So I forwarded Denis to Estonia, and he was basically the first character of our film, and that was 7 years ago. And but it took us 7 years to make this film, Tales of a Toy House. But this is very, very briefly. But this is also a story of a love on first sight. that's a very bold statement to make, but I'm very confident when I'm making it. I remember me being in a hospital wounded, and she comes into the ward, and I realized that she's in charge, whoever she is. I realized that this is Ulyana, and I realized that she was managing the Estonian humanitarian mission, which was first implemented right after the Maidan. I was undergoing rehabilitation in Estonia because I had a gunshot wound to one of my joints on my leg. So I needed rehabilitation. So we first met Anatoliy, the philanthropist who initiated this program. For us, he was a very closed man, and he was showing some of his incredible things that he did. But as we started talking more to him, as we lived for 2 weeks at his house, we grew closer with him, and we also grew closer to each other. So we are still in touch, and we hope that we make a couple more projects with Anatoliy. Well, just a question to the tech team. Can I see Ulyana and Denis in one of my screens? Because usually because instead I'm seeing myself, and I'm not very comfortable with that. Oh, Ulyana, Anatoliy, I'm very happy to see you. So this is a bridge to our discussion with about the film on Deck Daughters. But your film was 7 years in the making. But the film was made about Deck Daughters was also made in 7 years. It took 2,000 hours of footage to make it, and it also started with the Maidan. So this year, the national program included a lot of films which have been very long in the making, and it's a pleasure for us to watch how the directors grew over time, and we're also going to touch upon that during our conversation. And I'd like to ask maybe a similar question than the one I asked to Ulyana yesterday. So you met your lead character, and he became a close person, but to you. But when did you realize that you want to make a film about him? So what was the starting point that this was going to become a film ultimately? Well, actually, we have 2 viewpoints because there's 2 of us, but we often converge. But for the film, we actually agree most of the time, and we make one whole out of 2 parts. I realized that this is going to be a film. So starting to filming Anatoliy when I just met him was probably impossible at the outset, because he looked like a person immersed in himself and his work and his prayer and his he was doing something that seemed to be too universal and too incomprehensible for me at that time. But the moment when I realized that I want to make a film in Tallinn was when Anatoliy has shown us his workshop, and he showed us introduced us to the concept of transmitting information through woodwork. I could not grasp it at first, how you could embed information through woodwork, whether it's boards from a church or it's a deck of a ship. And it was Anatoliy that has shown me that all of this recycling could produce modern works of art which look as if they were made 200, 300 years ago. And using this technology, he had built a church in Tallinn, And he did the same for Tales of a Toy House, and also in his the manuscripts, which he creates using old monastery technologies, using parchments and ink, and all of this brings together traditional crafts and arts and a very meticulous attitude towards all of these towards time and artifacts of time, and this unique paper which can collect information for thousands of years. For us as documentary filmmakers, this became one of the most peculiar ways to store information, the self-made, handmade writing paper. So we started working with Anatoliy more and more, and we became friends, and we started filming him. And throughout these trips, the film was born. Well, there were probably two stages to this, because for everyone who comes to the Ukrainian Cultural Center in Tallinn in 22 Laboratornia Street, they start to see that as well. But when we came to him and we said, we're going to make a documentary, and he kind of took it in his stride. And we also realized that there were a lot of people who came before us who wanted to make a film, but all they end up making are some short videos. But the second stage, when we realized that this is going to be a film, it was in 2018 when we both went to Donbass with him, and it was this part when the toy horse appeared, and we realized that this is a film that is going to have depth, and it's got something to say. And this is what I started with. My understanding that Tallinn has got something powerful in it. And I realized that after our Ukrainian field trip, we have got a critical mass of footage. Then this is when I got this feeling that, yes, we are going to take this to the finish line. You mean, what do you mean? And you were, there was an ambition to make something that I've never made before, but also it was kind of a struggle between this and the real situation. We realized, we actually joke often that it's not that we made the Tales of a Toy Horse, but the Tales of a Toy Horse made us. And this is where we tried to do whatever we could to, but since we didn't have the experience with animation and working with film scoring, this was a struggle, but it wasn't a war.
So actually, this is the struggle that we are facing. Well, Ulyana, in your interview that you gave on Docudays website about the film premiere, you said that one of the motivations for you was to touch upon something constructive, something sustainable. And now, I can only conclude from your answer, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were trying and you wanted to, you aspired for packaging our desynchronization, our anxiety about the war and what's happening around us. And there is a person who offers not just answers to those questions. That person knows everything about oneself, and they offer this kind of philosophical gist. Is it a kind of philosophy upcycling? That you keep this information in your hands, and in the end we see that he, using pieces of paper, found does something. We won't be spoiling, yes, sure, but actually, still, This is a good question, I believe. I'll reformulate it, but about this counterpoint that you talked about, between some sustainability and inheritance of some philosophy, and the fact that we come to Donbass, what are the emotions? I believe that this is a whirlwind of emotions, and I really want to package them somehow. Does it mean that you actually found some calm in his answer? And did you want to convey it somehow on the screen? I understand very well this question, really, because this helplessness that you face when some events are taking place, big-scale events, and it's not just about the war, really. It can be relevant for anything that goes beyond a life of a separate person, what person can influence. So this is a huge problem, a huge issue which you have no control over. Makes many people just freeze. And even myself, at some moment when, for example, the war started, I am not ready to take weapons and to go to war. So what do? Do I just forget about it and pretend it doesn't exist? And Anatoliy's example is about living this drama when you understand that you are helpless in front of this global problem. But in some small things, in some small points, you can actually make the situation better. You can help a specific person, and this calm that appears, because you do not actually say no to life. You understand this complexity and the problems. You react to those problems, but still you do everything that you can. And you actually give your life forces and everything for that. It's just, in general, it is this phenomenon of volunteering. When people simply sacrifice their life for the sake of other people, for the sake of some internal feeling that I did everything that I could. And actually, it seems to me that this is a very strong concept as such, about overcoming, how you actually move over this frustration when it seems to you that there is something very big. And I think that Anatoliy's example in this case is actually very strong. And here, I would also add from myself this example, actually, that still I'm working it all out in myself, and it is still relevant that, as Ulyana has pointed out, you as a volunteer, as a person who has given and done everything that they could. But where is that boundary? What does it mean, everything you can? Does it mean your health or something else? This self-sacrifice, should it be to be an extremity that I gave myself, my vital force for the sake of someone? Or quite possibly, you can sincerely give it and you can have the feel that you did everything that you could, but still in this situation, you are not traumatized and you're not hurting yourself or your family. You are not sacrificing your health and life. So for us, Anatoliy became an example of a person who sincerely does everything that she can, that actually he can, and it's just that he knows that at some point there is a person who said, you know, you have a problem because you were shot at and you cannot walk, but I'll try. Thanks to my respect and connections, you could help me. And he helped, and there are tens, hundreds, or maybe, I don't know, maybe there are even thousands, but at least for sure some material help and some food. It's thousands of people who were helped. But still we understand that this person is age 70 plus, and it is a challenge for him. But how he does it, how he helps, how he treats life, really this correlates also in my personal behavior. and vision. And we tried to actually put it in the film so that we could see. I could say that I know this person and we're doing that, and then it was possible to show it without all that. You just actually could be next to that person and show this is possible, this is a documentary, so this is not something thought up. I just thought that this idea about volunteering, I remember that when Maidan ended and there was started and all these transformations in the country started, there was this, I might be exaggerating here, but still there was a discussion that there is danger in everything in the country being done by volunteers. It is like new institutions, new authorities, but actually volunteers started to doing everything for the war. And in many aspects it continues. It continues with procurement of mechanic ventilation. Sometimes volunteers replace the state where it doesn't work, and you cannot do anything with that. Maybe does it mean that the state has become so dependent on volunteers that they just not going to do anything because okay, they will do that? And it's interesting for me to discuss the system of volunteering. It moves from some organic, from the personality. Like, for example, there is an organic part, it could be a syndrome of a savior, and there is no superposition towards someone, so he or she doesn't save. It's what they do every day. And it seems to me that there is great beauty in that, and also in the fact that actually it superposes the fact that they don't just help, it's not just regular work, but the fact that it's interesting to see how they go somewhere, how something new and different is formed from that, some kind of art. And you can actually bridge it to a film by Irina Silik about the great power of art during the war. And it seems to me that actually in this we can actually rhyme your films, and in some sense your film is not just about the way a person is. It's like a making of piece. I'm not going to spoil anymore, but it is about creative process. Well, here I think that if you combine these two topics, volunteering and creativity, it is important not just to have a passion for change, for social activism, but in Anatoly's example, we actually see that there are two separate ways. That's spirituality, so being spiritual, having a spiritual component in what you do, and it's serving as a basis for activity, because in this case you are spiritually motivated and you are all set for anything, and no challenges are going to stop you, because you do not treat it as a problem that something prevents me from something. You treat it as a challenge, and having this spiritual foundation, you can move on. You are just not giving up. And just the same, the power of art. Anatoly turned out to be that unusual character for us, who combines an artist, a volunteer, who has been doing it since young years, and also a spiritual person. So it is this combination that allowed us to, as you say, have this making of, because we're interested not just in the process, but in general there is actually a conclusion. And here, and Anatoly really respects these good-natured Ukrainians. For 20 years, every day, he sees good things in the world every day, in any situation, and he tries to see something good in everything that he sees. And this philosophy is a combination of social activism, because try taking up that responsibility and saying that something is good, they're going to tell you you're a fool. But secondly, he's an artist by education, and we're really interested in his art. And really, Anatoly is a volunteer since the very beginning of war. Before that, he actively participated in anti-Soviet movement in Estonia. So we were really interested in observing him, and we're still interested. We'll happily visit him again as soon as the lockdown is over. And yeah, actually, as there was an Estonian premiere and Estonian release, it was, and in the middle of the release, all Estonian cinemas were shut down. But he did see the film, and for him, I mean, he never told us what to do and what not to do. We left everything that we wanted in the film, and we said, we have our own art, you have your own art. So, and that's it. But it was already on the 5th or 6th year of work that we reached that kind of note. But he saw the film, and actually this partially works on friendship between Ukraine and Estonia, because for me, when I found out that Estonia wants to take that something free of charge, I was like, well, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia. But when I left, I understood that our real brothers and sisters know about us, they worry about us, and to some extent they even know more about us than we know about ourselves. And they sincerely and openly root for us, support us, and we really wanted to add this small thing, make our own small contribution to friendship between Ukraine and Estonia. And that was our task. And why actually, that's actually what Anatoly helped us a lot with. And he became very proficient in combining the cultures, Estonian and Ukrainian.
And I would add something about Estonia, coming back to the question of whether the volunteers are doing too much so that the state can keep doing nothing. Well, I witnessed a very interesting phenomena. Actually, that happened back in the 90s, but I've been told that their state authorities were so passive and so inefficient that volunteer organizations basically substituted them completely out of some areas of responsibility of some state authorities, which were completely inefficient and useless. Well, as volunteers were showing specific results. I think this is not going to happen in Ukraine, and we see that this is not how it's happening in Ukraine, but waiting for someone to decide something and to do something. I don't think this is not how we do it. Actually, it's a very interesting comment about the state-forming function of the volunteering movement. I think a lot of studies have to be done about that, but even that's even interesting to discuss within the framework of your film. Let's continue this line with Estonia and about how well they know it. But there are, well, you made this film in co-production with the Estonian colleagues, and it's also been made with a view that it's going to be seen in Estonia. So it's not a domestic-only film. But is there a moment, were there any points that you, some issues or some moments or some points where you were thinking what to keep and what to leave out in the film so that it would be understood for the Estonian audience? And how would it be different if it were not, let's say, considering an Estonian audience? Or how did you model your target audience? I want to look outside of our Ukrainian bubble And I tried to understand how you can make a film that is not only targeted at the Ukrainian audience. Well, there are several components to the answer. One of the more obvious parts of the answer is that thanks to the Estonian co-producer Ulo Pikov, we had a part of the budget which was given to us by Estonia for the editing. And somehow they told us that the Estonian authorities said that you can use this editing director medium, or there was Nicola who could do a similar job, but there would be some issues. So first we didn't understand how it was, but Medium is actually super talented, and she is an Estonian who studied in the UK, and she is a top-notch pro in editing, and we didn't make a film for any specific audience, not for the Ukrainian audience, not for the Estonian audience, but we tried to just make a film which would be universally interesting, which would be interesting to us, which would be interesting to Miriam, and based on the rough cut which we made before we went into editing, before we went into Estonian editing, we had a rough cut of 75 minutes. So it was same story, same script, and that was the embodiment of our vision, our version. This was something that we used to pitch it to the Estonian institution. This is something that helped us tremendously, because working with Miriam was super productive. Even without understanding Ukrainian, she proposed some episodes. Even though she didn't know any Ukrainian, we saw that this was basically finished product, and there was energy in those clips. So we thought we were going to make a Ukrainian cut, then an Estonian cut, and then an international cut. We were inexperienced. We thought that we were going to do it. But thanks to Milian Yegorov, who was our director for editing, we made one version, which we watched it, then we looked at each other and we're like, okay, it works. And after we got this approved cut, we were showing this to all of our friends in our focus group who were authorized to show it, and they said, all of them said, yeah, it works. After that, we had no further questions about the target audience. The only thing is that we changed the name a little bit. The Estonian name means the war where there is a toy horse, and in English it's Tales of the Toy Horse. So again, the English and Ukrainian names are almost similar, but the Ukrainian name is the tail singular of a toy horse. So it's slightly different. In a way, Ukraine is similar to Estonia because in Estonia, this man is very well known. Anatoliy is well known. He is shown on TV. He knows the Estonian president, and he's quite a figure in the Estonian cultural community. So for us, it was even more difficult to explain to the Ukrainian audience why he is notable enough to make a movie about. Because in Estonia, it was obvious. So yes, Anatoly, who lives in the old town, who does this and that and the other. So he went to Ukraine to see the war, and this is what happened. And for Ukraine, he's not that famous. So for us, there is a certain, let's say, game we had to play to kind of introduce him. But the things that really concerned us were some very basic issues, which for us, they were not an issue. They were not an issue to us, but they actually became an issue later on. For example, when we showed the picture, some drawings and pictures in the film, it was obvious to us that they were made by Anatoly, but other people failed to grasp that. Also, we failed to show the geography of this cultural center, because it was all made out of wood, and all the rooms actually looked similar. We tried to demonstrate how the layout of and the geography of this place, and then we realized that that would be pointless to a person who has never been there, so we just stopped trying. Well, it feels in these scenes when you go up the stairs with this dog or cat in your hands. You see the expanse of the center and how... Actually, no, it's even though the space is quite something, but it's actually quite contracted. And it's maybe something about animation. I don't know, maybe some of the viewers. We see how he draws this horse and how it appears in the animation. And you realize that he is the co-author of the animation. And he didn't, in fact, well, he would, in fact, animate most of these images. And now there are a lot of questions from the audience, and of course we're going to answer these, so thank you very much for asking the questions. But the fact that Anatoly is not very well known in Ukraine, that's probably okay because we don't really watch Ukrainian diaspora in other countries that much, but the fact that he lives in Estonia gives him some different optics. So he's kind of a mirror that we can look into and understand something about ourselves, because he can get an external view on the situation that we are immersed in for the last 7 or 8 years. So Larissa here asks whether you keep in touch with Anatoly and the Estonian community, and how do they see the situation in the east of Ukraine, and whether there's any disappointment. Yes, we definitely totally keep in touch. Anatoly and the Ukrainian community in Tallinn is not the same, even though Anatoly is its active member. So I can't vouch for the entire Ukrainian community, but for Anatoly, I'm not really sure. But there is no disappointment, definitely, because he is a person who was born after the war, 1946-ish. So he's seen quite a few things in his life, and it's difficult to say exactly what's on his mind, but if he would probably be disappointed if we all got pessimistic and we gave up. That's what would make him real disappointed. But if there is fire in our eyes and our hearts and our hands that are doing something, he always believes in people who do something. And as long as we don't give up and we keep doing things and we keep demonstrating things that something was done right, just like our Ukrainian program this year, everything would be good, and it would not disappoint him. But in terms of nuance, he told us many times, even when he went to Ukraine, he never made, so even when he visited the front line, he never drew political conclusions, because all the soldiers, everybody had some political views, but he would never talk openly about his political views, because he had a mission. He wanted to find small rural hospitals near the front line and people in need, and this is something that, and I think he did that on purpose so that he doesn't block any connections that would be actionable later on, because maybe he would need to turn to some people for help, and then he wouldn't be able to do it if he had a diverging political opinion, so he didn't share his. And regarding the Ukrainian diaspora in Estonia, I'd like to say that Estonia and ethnic Estonians who lived there, they really support Ukraine. And when in 2014 there was this first call for humanitarian assistance in Ukraine, that we lack warm clothes, I actually remember them sending over 50 tons of clothes in 2 or 3 days. The response was incredible. Politically, this information war that is still happening, it's also happening in Estonia, and the Ukrainian diaspora actively responds to all of these different. There was a case recently when Estonian textbooks included a world map where Crimea was displayed as Russian, and the Ukrainian diaspora made an official request to the Ministry of Education saying that this is not correct, this is not the right thing to do. So the book was actually recalled. So all of these small things, which are difficult to evaluate at scale, but these are the small things that the information field ultimately consists of. And I think this is very important, and that they are also cognizant of this Ukrainian idea, and they're respectful of it. And of course, they're cognizant of international law, because Crimea is temporarily occupied as per any reasonable international agreement, and there's recognition of the international community and of that fact. And it's great that this was a grassroots initiative, even without the involvement of the Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for them to recall the textbook. But here's a question from Anastasia. Did you meet any other personalities that you'd like to show to the world at the time being? And the second question is, how much could you see the Estonians' view of the Ukrainians and the situation in our country through the optics of one person?
Well, actually, there is a director that we know. He told us that there are 7 billion stories in the world, and we have to tell all of them. But actually, we are surrounded by a lot of great people. Each of them has their story, which can touch many other people. But also, presently, we are not working on any project in detail, so that I could actually tell you about it. As for the attitude in the film, you could actually see that, because Anatoly himself is an ethnic Ukrainian, and for his whole life he kept living in Ukrainian community. He developed it in Estonia. Even though he studied in an Estonian Academy of Arts and has lots of Estonian friends, still he remains a Ukrainian, and we cannot say that he became an Estonian due to living there for 40 years. So Estonia's attitude to Ukraine is something that we know only from our personal experience. So last year, just by accident, we stuck in Estonia for 6 months. Due to the lockdowns, we went to work for editing. We were supposed to spend 3 weeks there and come back. But we instead spent the 6 months, and I can say that the attitude of Estonians to Ukraine is very inspiring. They are really trying to support us on all levels, starting from diplomatic level and the highest officials. Just by this good attitude, they are interested in what's happening with us. And sometimes it seems to me that sometimes they even pay more attention, because for us, the war and all this social things, they are something constant for us, something's happening with us all the time, and many people are kind of tired from discussing that in informal conversations, and it simply becomes a background of our life. But for Ukrainians, for Estonians, it is not that close, but still it is close enough to be interested in what's happening in Ukraine and support as far as they can. Okay, but still we shouldn't be relaxing. That's true. Nobody should be relaxing because they, they treat us well. Then there is a school textbook saying the Crimea is a part of Russia. And still in Ukraine there are in Estonia there are invisible forces which can actually have this imperial narratives. And another question from the viewer. You used to film that film in Donetsk region in Estonia. How they treated Ukrainian directors in both places? We have this superpower, This is actually... we have this very small camera. We filmed on Sony. And we don't have these huge monopods. We have all this... We have this, we recorded the sound on the camera. We also used very small, almost invisible recorder. And actually, we weren't treated as directors because we had this sort of cap of invisibility. They simply treated us as a humanitarian mission because we were a part of a humanitarian mission headed by Anatoliy Lyutyuk, who was actually a very interested person. And then actually we didn't even go somewhere without Anatoly, and because we were together, we were interested in the way we didn't have to there, and we were actually interested to see how he was reacting. I wasn't interested in my reflections, I was interested in reflections by Anatoly, and then I saw the material and I could actually deal with it. In Tallinn, starting from the very first time when we came there in 2014, we actually met our character, and it's like, okay, let's film a video. There was Easter there. I'll borrow a camera. I had a laptop with me. We had some greeting from Estonian community to Ukrainians, Easter dedicated to Easter, and that's how we managed to enter this crowd as these young directors and artists who want to film something. And then just like in Donbass, we followed Anatoly everywhere until people just got used that these two people are Anatoly's friends and they have some ideas and they are going to do something. And the way Anatoly reacted to us, in a positive way, he tried to always give us what we wanted, even if we didn't know what we were filming. He still produced some ideas for us, and like this project or that project. We weren't really interested in the project as such, but still, as the way he treated us, everybody looked at us and understood that this is Anatoly's team. So it was under the aegis of Anatoly, that we implemented our vision, which he didn't actually control, but he still initiated it rather often. We talked a lot about cinema and art and the war and how he told about it. It's like, we're right, you're not right. On the one hand, it's true, but on the other hand, sometimes people don't like it, and we were looking for this kind of shape using documentary real events, so that this is not a tale like this coffee time fairy tale, and so that it is not something very hard military story, a military drama, that there is no end and no beginning to all that. We tried to balance there, and in the conversations with Anatoly, we thought what could happen. And then at some point, this event or situation happened, and Anatoly would just come up to us and it's like, okay, let us cut out a wooden horse from the place where I learned to do that. And thanks to these conversations and thanks to our constant contact with Anatoly, we see ourselves as artists, and he's also an artist, of course, and in these new ideas and the wish to create something new and very important, Until today, we communicate, and like in 15 minutes, this happens. And in the future, we really plan to work more than Anatoliy because he's a very important person, and I want to be close to him as much as possible. Okay. And how did this horse appear? The horse is a kind of your guide to the level of animation, fairy tale, which tears us from this reality that we're in. This is also a level of some abstraction. As far as I understood, it wasn't from the beginning. It just appeared at some point. And when did you decide to make that horse a center of your narration? And why a tail? Well, that's a good question. In the beginning, whether it's the horse or it's us, because Anatoliy has a collection of wooden horses, and as I already told you, he built a church in Tallinn. Actually, he created a parish, Greek Catholic parish, and in the very foundation of this place, which was allocated, they found a skeleton of a horse. And they also found a hand, a fragment of a hand, a stone hand. And this horse became a symbol of this space created by Anatoliy, and the hand became a symbol of the third hand of three-handed Virgin Mary, because it's her name that was used to actually call the church, and she uses the third hand to help everyone who was hurt. And it's not just the humanity that can be hurt, but also animals, plants, and nature in general, because they also live in and they also suffer at some moments. And this horse, this collection of horses, the Museum of Horses, were even before we arrived in Tallinn. And Anatoliy has everything around horses, some craft and working with wood. And in my opinion, Anatoliy simply thought about that for a rather long time, and we became an element of this mechanism, this tale about a horse, yes. And physically, it appeared in the Carpathians. Actually, the very first days, we had a 10-day trip to Donbass. The first day started from Ivano-Frankivsk because we had to pick up a person there, and then we went towards the front line. And that's why we decided to do that. And then Anatoliy just offered, okay, actually, I could make a horse, and you're going to ride around with the horse. But the horse did open the door to the fairy tales, the door to people who are surrounded by problems, and I mean, not maybe daily suffering, but at least permanent depression. They saw this bearded and bald person with the toy who said, well, do you know a story about mutual help of animals and people at war? And people are like, okay, we're making a fairy tale. And all these people just switched on immediately. They started reacting, and they simply went into this world that we needed, and they managed to leave this grief that they were in, and they could remember those moments of communication with plants and animals. That was already therapeutic, the fact that they remember these happy times. That, yes, actually, there is kindness, even here. That was very valuable. Something else? No? Actually, I remembered when I watched a film that in the UK there is a monument to animals who died during World War I. So actually they have big commemoration of World War I, but there is actually the monument of animals who died in service. So there are lots of military stories, but actually I thought that the very conversation that not only people suffer, but everything around us suffers and actually feels the impact of war. And this is a very humane and very nice story. We are expanding our space for empathy in this way, and in the very end I wanted to touch a topic that I saw in your film, and maybe I just mentioned for myself, but the very first animation strip that we have, it looks like something historical. It is about something that existed before, something recognizably Ukrainian. It can be recognized by some traditions, by the horse, which is also a big archetype, because it's a fairy tale character. Then there is this implementation, and then the implementation, and then further on, knowing what's going to happen later. We are working, so like there is the story about Donbass, industrialization, Soviet Union, and all that, then Ruski Mir and the war. Is it also actually the counterpoint? Why is this story important inside the film, in your universe of the directors? Is it really one of the topics that you wanted to touch upon in your work? Well, actually, I grew up in a small town, and for me, communication with nature was normal. Going to the forest or to a lake. It was the nature that surrounds you all the time, everywhere, and never, at least it just worked for me like that. I never went to industrial cities. I never saw those factories, because there are people for whom it is usual, but for me it was a very new experience. And when we arrived to Avdiivka and saw this huge factory and the train, which was actually endless, this train loaded with coal and simply goes and goes and goes and goes, and I became aware how big should be the holes dug in the ground when you want to take so much coal out of it. And well, we saw it just one day, but it happens every day for years and years, and these huge hills. I was so impressed. I understood that this human avidity, that if you go deeper, you get more. And I mean, that's what it stems from. I mean, for myself, it is the opposition of something natural and this iron world of the machines, which actually symbolizes industrialization and the war, of course. So this is this iron world which is not living and doesn't have any feelings.
And for us, this was the first animation that we codenamed The Legend, and this was the only animation story that we came up with, not Anatoliy, and for us. It is a legend because after visiting the Donbass with Ulyana, and this is the quintessence of our conversations, and this is probably not even the line between the East and the West, but between certain people who live in the East and the West. I think this moment when we saw all of the coal and the mines and all of the... But this is the point of this tremendous effort needed to take this coal out of the ground. And it takes so much effort that it takes health and life, and sometimes some people's lives get cut short just to take this coal out of the ground, as opposed to this philosophy of putting something in the ground and growing it in the ground. And I think these are two cultures and two global systems. Likewise, in the Donbass, there are people who believe in the good, but there are some people who keep taking and taking and taking. And even when something is good, it's still every day. It's an everyday thing. It's not enough anymore. But I think the culture of growing and the culture of taking, these are two different cultures which we wanted to highlight in this animation. But it's great when at least we don't have a specific key to these pieces or to this film. We just feel that something is the way it is, and we go along with it and we try it. But also, I wanted to say that use Tales of a Toy Horse as a hashtag on social networks and tag us. And we will be very happy to discuss and to talk to you. Maybe we can engage in some constructive joint action. So thank you very much. Again, congratulations on the premiere that started 2 minutes ago. The access to the film has been opened, so hooray! It's now accessible through DocuSpace, and besides using the hashtags, you can also send your questions and comments at the same page you would use to watch the film. Also, you can vote for the film in the viewers' voting. Also, tomorrow at the same time, we're going to meet for a tete-a-tete with Helena Yaroshevich and talk about her film. Ulyana and Denis, thank you very much for this amazing conversation. And thank you, our dear viewers, for tuning in and listening to us. Thank you very much. Hugs and kisses. XOXO.